My peeps, my peeps, my peeps, my peeps. Hope y'all doing good. Um, Today is a special one. I have a special guest, and I'm quite intrigued and excited about this one. Big, big personality in their industry. Been dominating it for decades. Um, it wasn't easy. Very busy person, but I'm grateful and happy that I was able to have them on my podcast. So um, be tuned in for this one because it's going to be a good one. This is just the intro, just to get y'all going, but stay tuned because it will be great. And again, I appreciate the love, I appreciate the support. Keep subscribing, keep liking, keep the dream going because that's how we're getting um, big guests for y'all and good content and a great conversation. Stay tuned. I'm excited, to be honest.
Oh, cool.
It was actually interesting to actually kind of get ready for you um, because there were so many things where I could just yap about for hours and hours, and then just trying to like put everything together in like a small period of time was kind of
Mm.
interesting. But
I've done a lot of things in my
I
life,
know,
I guess.
which is great. So I wanted to start this in a different way
Okay.
where I am just intrigued to know who you are, really. So, like,
Okay.
life before fame, where are you from? As simple as that.
Sure. God, life before fame. It's funny that you say that because I just do not consider myself to be like famous.
Well,
I don't, well, it's not like I walk down the street and like people recognize me. I don't get like stopped. There's like, it's not like paparazzi follows me. So,
that's
um,
interesting.
yeah, I don't know. I don't consider myself famous, but thank you. I'll take it. Okay, life before fame. I mean, I had a really normal childhood. A lot of people wonder about that, of course, because my mother is Suze Randall, who is a well-known, let's just say like female pornographer. She was one of the first women to work behind the camera in a male-dominated industry. Both my parents worked in the adult industry. A lot of people don't know much about my father, but my father, Humphrey Knipe, was the man behind, the powerhouse that is Suze Randall.
All
He
right.
was the one that ran the business. He was the one that, guided her. He was the one that made the business deals. So my mom would not be who she is without my dad. And I always want to give him the credit where credit is due because my father was an incredibly influential person in my life and in hers. And I know he's kind of like a silent partner, but he's, immensely important to the both of us.
Good
He
mastermind.
passed away a couple of years ago and we both like miss him
Sorry about that.
immensely. And thank you. And I feel like in his absence, it's like even more important to me that like people know like how significant of a figure he was in both of our success, really. But yeah, my parents both immigrated here a couple years before I was born. My mother's from England, my father's from South Africa, and
Wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
I have a big family in South Africa.
Wow.
Um, so I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born in Hollywood. That's actually why my name is Holly. And
It.
you
Wow.
Yeah, and, just grew up in very normal childhood, rode horses, went to Venice Beach every weekend with my parents, have a younger brother and sister, went to school. My parents were very adamant about me getting good grades. I, was on the basketball team. I had a very
Okay.
normal childhood.
Okay.
I kind of knew what my parents did always. The most common question I get is when did you find out what your parents did for a living? And the truth is that there was no like one moment that was this like huge epiphany, there wasn't this aha moment where I was like, "Oh my god, my parents are pornographers." It was just something that was I must have known from an early age. My parents never really hid it from me. I think that they certainly didn't show it to me at a young age. They just fed me information as it was age appropriate. And it was never approached with any sense of shame, right? It wasn't something that was considered like a shameful secret that had to be hidden. But obviously, pornography is not appropriate for children. So it wasn't something that they really shared with me as a kid. From what I remember as a child, my earliest memories was that I understood that what, mommy and daddy did was they took pictures and made movies for grown-ups. That was like my earliest understanding of what they did. It was for grown-ups and it wasn't for children. And that's why I was not allowed into the back rooms in their office, which was the guest house where I lived. And when you're a kid, like, you really don't care what your parents do for a
That's
living.
true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, as long as they can buy you toys and like take you to Disneyland, like, you don't care what they
That's
do.
fair. Yeah.
So it wasn't until, of course, I got older and I began to hit puberty that I became more interested in what they did. And I began to have more of an understanding of what they did. And I started to sneak into those back rooms in the office and
Oh,
steal the magazines that they had back there.
wow.
Now, my mom was shooting mostly for men's magazines. She did shoot movies a little bit back in the 70s. I think, yeah, back in the 70s, like early 80s. But actually, what stopped her from shooting movies was when the AIDS epidemic came around. Once AIDS entered the into society and people began getting sick, that kind of really freaked my parents out. And I actually remember them having a blood truck outside
No
of
way.
our house parked on the street because my parents were trying to get performers tested for HIV before they did a movie. But of course, back then, the results would take like a couple of weeks to get back. And who knows what happens in those couple of weeks. And I think the testing wasn't nearly as accurate, so it really wasn't an effective method whatsoever. And so that actually kind of pushed them out of the movie making business, and they just stuck with photography, which back then was incredibly lucrative anyways. And the thing was is that back then you didn't have to shoot penetration. In fact, you couldn't. The magazines didn't
Interesting.
show hardcore penetration. And this is because the magazines were distributed across several different territories, and different territories had different rules.
Okay.
Different states had different rules, and like Canada specifically had stricter rules than the US. And so there was no penetration shown in any of the magazines. In fact, not only was there no penetration allowed, but there was like very specific ways in which you could like show the penis and the vagina like
Really?
aligned. Like the penis couldn't even like be pointed directly at the vagina. It had to be pointed
Wow.
at like a kind of like a 45-degree angle. Like,
Yes.
so these guys would kind of pose next to these women with these kind of like half hard
Yeah.
penises.
Oh my
And
God.
and that was
That
that
was
was,
it.
that was erotic, hardcore boy girl photography back in the day, which obviously didn't
That's
require
interesting.
penetration,
Mhm.
which is, why, testing wasn't a thing, which is why, the AIDS issue wasn't really an issue with shooting those kinds of things because there wasn't any actual sex between the performers.
Okay.
Um, So needless to say, the, magazines that I was stealing from my parents back in the day and looking at, when I was going through puberty is significantly different than like what kids are
Yeah.
sneaking and looking at on Pornhub these days. I mean, it's so different now. It's kind of crazy to think about it.
It is crazy. It is
Yeah.
crazy. Wow. Creative. So You actually answer a lot of questions because I was about to ask, when did you decide that you wanted to do it? Kind of, because it seems like all of y'all have that kind of like creative mind. Your dad, your mom. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start, to be honest. Even if you give me a camera and all that, it's even just taking photos of someone and making someone comfortable enough to like show you different angles and stuff like that. That's just something that just doesn't even click to me. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting to me.
I mean, like anything else, it takes practice, right?
Mhm.
So when I'd always been obsessed with images, ever since I was a kid. I would go through all my mom's fashion magazines and I would rip out photos and I would put them all on my wall. And I mean, when I was younger, I actually thought I wanted to be a model. And my mom dissuaded me from that. She told me that actually that you should really consider, if you really love like the world of modeling and that kind of thing, you should really think about becoming a photographer because you have the power as a photographer. As a model, you're pretty powerless and you're subject to the whims of other people.
Interesting.
And she's, spoke from experience. She was a model before she was a photographer. And I think that she, wanted me to understand like it's hard being a model. There's a lot of rejection and it's difficult on your self-confidence. And I think also she like recognized the fact that I didn't really have it in me to be a model. So she very kindly tried to push me in the other direction. She's like, why don't you try
Interesting.
photography? Here's a camera. You might be better at this.
Interesting.
So I took my first photography class when I was 12. And I actually remember this was definitely one of those pivotal moments in my life. I was in the dark room. I'd shot like my first, test shoot for class. And I remember I developed the film. This is back when there was film, people. This is before digital cameras. And we used to develop things in a dark room in this thing called
With the little
developers.
red light.
And yeah, with the red light. I know
Oh,
this sounds
okay.
crazy, but this is the way it used to be. And so I put that print in the developer tray, and I remember the image like materializing on the paper. And I just remember, I still remember that moment so clearly. And it just hooked me like that. And I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I just knew it, and there aren't a lot of things in my life that I've been like 100% sure about, but this was like one of them. I was like, I want to be a photographer. This is what I want to do. And I was in love. And I spent, the rest of that school year, I spent like my nutrition and my lunch like in the dark room. I was just constantly, you know,
Wow.
doing photography. I was also like immensely unpopular and socially awkward. So it was very helpful for me to just hide from people in the dark room. But I loved it. And then obviously, my mom encouraged me with that. And so I would, shoot my friends. I shot a lot of pictures of my little sister. My little sister was actually very photogenic and she ended up being a Ford model for a
Wow.
while. But she's a nurse now, but she was a very photogenic kid. So
Wow.
I used to take lots of pictures of her. And so, I went through high school. I was the staff yearbook photographer, and I
Okay.
just loved it. Took like photography classes all through school. Now, of course, in high school, I did not think that I was going to get in porn. I was going to be a fashion photographer, right, or celebrity photographer. That was my goal.
That's
So
interesting. Okay.
I ended up going to Brooks Photography School,
Hmm.
and I was about a year and a half into that, and my parents had just launched their website, suze.net. Now this is like 1998, I think,
Hmm.
and we launched the website like I think it was like a month before or a month after Google launched. This is how long ago it was,
Wow.
right? So yeah, we're talking way back. And my mom had the biggest private archive of adult photography content. So many other photographers had spent their lives shooting for brands that owned their photography. Like Arnie Freytag shot all of his content belonged to Playboy. Earl Miller, all of his content belonged
Okay.
to Penthouse. You know, so many photographers, their content belonged to the magazine that they shot for. But my mom, mostly because she was constantly fighting and falling out with a lot of magazines and bouncing back and forth to different magazines. She owned a lot of her photographs, which was very
Good for her.
unusual.
Wow.
So when the internet came along, she suddenly had this
Oh yeah.
other way to monetize her content, which ended up being incredibly fortuitous. So
Wow.
launched the website. It was doing really well. My parents had no idea what they were doing. I mean, it was the early days of the internet. Kind of nobody
Hmm.
really knew what they were doing. And my father actually begged me to move back home and help them run the website. And I wasn't really feeling it at Brooks. I felt very stifled. It was a school that put out commercial photographers, wedding photographers, product
Hmm.
photographers. It was just, it wasn't the school that resonated with me. I remember the final straw for me was a friend of mine was graduating, and they had their grad show, which meant that, like, when you were graduating, everybody like put up their best photos and they hung them in the walls of the school, and people would come to the graduation, they would go and they would see everybody's work, and he had some beautiful nudes, and they were super tasteful, and there weren't even that many of them, and Mr. Brooks had somebody go up and put white tape over the nipples of a bunch of his photos, and he was just devastated, because he had effectively censored and destroyed his work. And that was
Oh,
kind
okay.
of this moment where I was like, "Nah, fuck this
No.
place. This is bullshit." And so I moved home. My father promised me a
Uh-oh.
my father promised me a apartment in Malibu and a Ferrari if I moved home. I moved back into my old bedroom and I got a Ford Explorer.
Oh, oh wow. What happened?
I mean, he was joking. I would never drive a Ferrari anyways. Like, oh my god, I wouldn't be caught dead in a Ferrari. I hate those kinds of cars. They're so flashy. Never. I would never drive a Ferrari. Um, so
Oh.
no, initially my thought was that I was just going to like kind of help them with some admin stuff, and then I
Mhm.
was going to like move on and do something else. I actually at the time thought I was going to go and pursue the other career that I was considering, which was becoming an English teacher.
Oh
Literature
my God.
was my other love, and I ended up going back to school. I went to UCLA and I
That's
graduated with a
interesting that
degree
you
in
say
world
that.
literature. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I thought I'll become an English teacher because that sounded like sensible and it sounded reliable. And so that was what I thought I was going to do. And then the longer I worked for my mom, the more I found that I really enjoyed it.
Hmm.
And I very much like grew up in porn in the Sue's bubble. So it was a workplace run by a woman, filled with a lot of women. It was very female oriented. It was very much about female empowerment. The content that we produced was really beautiful and highly stylized and glamorous,
Hmm.
and we didn't do really hardcore stuff, and we were very attentive to the needs of the model. My mom would always say, you're only as good as your model feels. That was kind of like her motto, which is true. Like it's
Very
really
true.
important that your model feels beautiful and safe, and that she's
But how
having
do you
a
do
good
that?
time. Hmm?
How do you do that if you just meet someone for the first time? Like,
Well, I mean, I mean, look, obviously it depends, right? Like sometimes if somebody's super green, like no matter how hard you try, it's going to be hard to make them feel comfortable at
Mhm.
all, but you can certainly make them feel more comfortable than they would otherwise. And it's really just about like attending to their needs, like first of all, making sure that there's women on set, which clearly there were a lot of women on set,
Mhm.
making sure that they understand what they're doing that day, making sure that they're okay with what they're doing that day, right? That it feels all right to them and that they
Mhm.
agree to it and they're comfortable with it. Comfortable in the sense that like they agree to it and they understand what they're getting into, that they're fed, that they feel beautiful. You have a great makeup artist, you have a good stylist, that they like what they're wearing, they like how their makeup looks,
Okay.
um, and just working with them and kind of coaching them and coaxing them and complimenting them. And I mean, the longer that you shoot, the more you learn to like feel people out. It's kind of like you learn to really, as a director and a photographer, you learn to read people and you learn
Mm.
to like see what they might need and anticipate,
Mhm.
the things that you can say to make them feel better about themselves. So it's really about like curating an environment that, you know, feels safe and fun and enjoyable. And having like the right crew is so important. I mean, I can't tell you how important a good crew is. That's like everything. Like people, may think sometimes that I'm like this really talented photographer or whatever. And I disagree. I think where my talent lies is seeing the talent in other people. I think I'm good at finding people who are good at what they do, and I bring them together, and together we produce a good product. I think that the talent
Interesting.
of the people you surround yourself with, like, cannot be underestimated.
That's super interesting. So, how do you go from taking photos to producing and then directing? And do you feel like going back to school, getting your English degree has a role in the whole thing, or it's
I
just
mean,
a plus?
you know, I went to school and I got my English degree mostly because, like, everybody in my family had a college degree, and I knew that my father would never let me hear the end of it if I didn't get a college degree. In fact, it was kind of a running joke in the family because I didn't do the graduation ceremony.
Okay.
Um, because, like, my brother graduated from Georgetown University. My sister graduated from that place on the East Coast that's for liberal and progressive fancy people. Starts with an H. Anyways, whatever.
Harvard?
So they no, no, not Harvard. Not Harvard. No, 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 no. No, it's like a small like private school.
Howard, maybe? No?
No, 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 no. Whatever. Anyways, doesn't matter. But my point is that they both had these really like big graduation ceremonies that were on the
Mhm.
East Coast that we had to travel to, and they were just like, I mean, look, if you've ever been to a college graduation, they are so fucking boring and so long, right? And it
Yeah.
was like I thought I was being, very considerate by not forcing my parents to go through a third graduation ceremony. I was like, look, you know, I got my degree, I finished class, I got my goddamn certificate. Um, it's hanging in my house, but because I never had a graduation, my dad used to tease me that I never actually graduated from college after all, and that I like faked my
Uh,
degree. Um, so, anyways, needless to say, like education is very important in my family. I actually come from a family of teachers. My father used to be a teacher. He was a
interesting.
history teacher at Rhodes University in South Africa before he met my mom.
Okay.
So going back to school was mostly to was partially to make my dad happy, but also I think was like follow through, right? I think that it's really important to follow through and finish things. And I think that that's kind of for me like what my college degree represents, was that I've finished something and I followed through on something. And I think that that's something that, is echoed in the rest of my life and my career. I'm very much somebody who believes in finishing and following through on something. I always follow through on things. I always, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it,
Hmm.
I like to be a woman of my word.
I love that.
So, um, what was the rest of the question?
Oh, how did you get into like going from
Oh,
photos to like producing and
right.
the whole thing?
So, yes. So, okay. So, obviously, so I'm doing photography, and you mentioned earlier, like you wouldn't know how to direct somebody, right?
I
And
don't know.
yes, that was definitely something that was super terrifying for me at the beginning. And my mom really kind of like hand fed me models as my experience progressed. So at the beginning, I was mostly I was assisting her. So I was learning from her, being on set, watching the way that she directed models, learning from her about posing, learning from her assistants about lighting. Like, that's like the most important and best way to learn, is just being on set and just absorbing everything from other photographers, directors, etc. So I got all of that schooling. And then became really good friends with a couple of the models, and we were actually running their model sites at the time, because before OnlyFans came along, if you were um, a model who had a big enough fan base, you could maybe start your own website and you could make extra money that way. Nothing
Mm,
close to what you can make on OnlyFans now, but it was like some models could start a website and make some extra money. So Amy Sweet, Aria Giovanni, and Alexis Winston and I became very, very close friends,
okay.
and I started shooting them. Amy Sweet in particular, she was my very first nude shoot, and yeah, I just remember being like
Wow.
absolutely terrified. I couldn't give any direction. I just like held the camera and I was just like, snap, stop, 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 stop. And but she was a great model, so she knew how to move. She did all the things. I didn't have to give her any direction. All I had to do was like press the button. She was
Yeah.
magical. And then, as more I shot, the more comfortable I became, and so, but it was a slow procession. It took me a while to become comfortable.
Okay.
Um, and then, so how I moved to producing and directing. So honestly, like in the adult world, it's a much smaller production, and the budgets are a lot smaller than mainstream. So essentially, if you're a photographer or a director, you're kind of also the producer. Like in mainstream,
Okay.
you'll have like a producer who actually like puts the shoot together, or like executive producers who fund it. You'll have like a line producer who manages the money. You'll have like a story producer who, puts together the story. Like in porn, you have one person that does all of that. Like, we don't really get the luxury of other people like doing multiple jobs. And also, the projects themselves are much smaller and usually take place over 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 days, where obviously like a movie, like a big mainstream movie, can take a year, 2 years. So they're different in scope. Um, but really, what started happening was the internet started to change, right? And technology started to accelerate. And what was, so easy to make money at before, which was just photos, so the reason that I started moving towards directing and producing and away from photography was because the internet itself started to change. Now, the internet speeds started to increase, bandwidth started to become less expensive and more accessible. And so before, when we were able to just do photography and do incredibly well, there was a more of a demand for video, and video was something now that you could actually access online, because before, bandwidth was expensive, Internet was slow. I mean, it would take you forever. I mean, when I first started, it would take you forever to download one picture, you know, much less video. That was never happening. But that obviously started to change. And so people wanted video. And that wasn't something that, we really did. We were photographers, but I saw things changing. And so I started to push my mom back towards video, which was something that she wanted to get back into. She'd made movies back in the 80s on film where literally the way you edited it was you took the film and you cut it and then you glued it back
Got it.
together and you put it through a projector, right? So like
Wow.
that's how
Wow.
you did it in her day. This is
Wow.
video, this is like DV tapes.
Yeah.
And she was pretty resistant, but I knew that this was something that we had to do. So we started butting heads a lot. She did not want to go into video. I knew that this is where we had to go. And so, to be honest, we started fighting a lot.
Uh-oh.
And I began to see that, I was starting to kind of outgrow her. And I
Mm.
wanted to move out on my own. I wanted to strike out on my own and I wanted to do my own business and I wanted to move forward independently. So I stopped working for my parents and I launched Holly Randall Productions. And I started. I took out a. I remember I cashed in like one of my like IRA bonds, and
Mhm.
yeah, I started shooting on my own. I started shooting for other companies, which I had never done before. The first company I started working for was Adam and Eve for Jim Malibu, who was a lovely, lovely director. He was really, really sweet. Um, and so I started doing photography on set for him for his movies. I have never realized how inept I was at working by myself until I started working for him. I had been so coddled by working for my mom and having her assistants light for me and being
Mhm.
in her studio with all of the equipment, and everything being done for me, that the minute that I went out by myself, with a few lights on my own, and, I didn't have all day to shoot these pictures. It was about the video, it was about the movie. I was like, get in there, get your shots and get the fuck out. Like we're shooting a movie. So,
Yeah.
if I tried to take more than 15 minutes to shoot pictures, I got yelled at. And so like it was I shot some really terrible photos. It was very humbling.
That's how you learn.
It
That's
was sink or
interesting.
swim. Yeah, it was fine enough for him. He didn't care. Like honestly, like he just liked me, I think. And I tried to be really
Okay.
helpful and I think he liked having another woman on set and stuff like that. But yeah, I learned more, I think, like trying to go out on my own and just struggling by myself than I did, like kind of working, being surrounded by people who just did things for me. Um,
Well,
and then I started shooting for Twisties. And I remember I submitted a couple of videos for them. And at first, like, they weren't interested in working with me. They did not want me. This is before they got sold out to what is now ALU. Back then it was Mansev, I think. They've been through a couple of different iterations. But this was back when it was owned by
mhm.
Shap, the original guy who started Twisties. And yeah, they were not interested in me at all, and I had to like submit a couple of free on spec videos for them before they finally like agreed to give me a try. And then I ended up being one of their main directors and photographers for like 12 years or something like that. But I had
Wow.
to hustle, like people didn't care that I was Suze Randall's daughter. You know what I mean? Like I had to go out and prove myself. I had to shoot stuff for free. I had same with Playboy. I had to go to Playboy and
Do you think it
like
was harder?
um I don't think it was harder. Definitely not harder. Like I could get my foot in the door because of my name, for sure. That, I got my
Okay.
emails answered for sure and it may have been harder if I wasn't. I
Mhm.
think also being a woman honestly was harder. It was easier. I know that in a lot of other industries, being a woman may have been harder, but I think honestly, in the adult industry, being a woman as a photographer and director was kind of
Oh,
easier
wow.
because we're so, at least at the time, so unusual. I was like the only one of the only ones. So yeah, it was a little bit easier, but I still had to prove
Wow.
myself. People weren't just going to give me a job just because. I had to like show that I could do it and that I was good at it. And then, yeah,
Sure
it just
did.
kind of grew from there.
Now, you mentioned it, um, OnlyFans coming into the industry in a weird way and then just taking over and kind of like changing everything, like you said, from website to now creator just going on their own and just becoming huge. And I think I've read about a basketball player in like 10 years of like WNBA. I think in one day on OnlyFans, she made as much as like her whole career. And I was just like, wow, that's from a financial standpoint and a quote unquote freedom. That's big. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. So, how do you feel about OnlyFans and that new platform that just completely changed everything at this point?
It's hard to overstate like how much OnlyFans has changed the landscape of adult entertainment, um, and how it's empowered creators. You know, I've been in this industry 26 years and I grew up around it. And performers, models have never had the kind of like power and financial independence as they do today,
Mm,
which I think is great. The power shift has been immense, and I think that that's been so positive for the industry. And I think really what it speaks to is the need for that kind of like human connection between fans and creators. Really, I think like the one element that was really missing from the movies and the websites and the way that adult content was distributed before was that direct connection between fans and creators, which OnlyFans was kind of one of the first ones to provide. I mean, obviously that happened on webcam sites, right? But a lot of people didn't necessarily want to go in and, I don't know, watch like a live show. Like sometimes people just want
mhm.
to message somebody, right? And they just
Yeah.
want to like get messaged back. Like the way, because it played into the whole like kind of texting thing that all of us do now all day long, all the time, because it feels like that natural texting back and forth, I think is why it's so easy for people and so natural for people. And also because it follows like the Twitter format that people got so into and got so used to. I mean, there was just so many like things that I think happened like serendipitously and organically with OnlyFans and all these other things that were kind of happening at the same time. Because I remember when OnlyFans first came out, and like I grabbed my username just because I wanted to make sure that nobody else had it. But like I was like, this platform is never going to go anywhere. It's like this is nonsense.
That's what I'm saying. It's in a very strange way. It just woke up one day and then, oh,
It,
okay.
it really did. It just all of a
But
sudden like
I know.
just took off. I mean, obviously the pandemic had a huge part of that, right? But it was doing pretty well
True.
before that.
Hmm. Which is
Yeah, I
very
think
interesting.
it was a surprise to everybody, I think.
It's it's interesting because you had like X and the Twitters, and then I mean you didn't see it coming. Not this way.
Right.
It's interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
But do you feel like something like that made you want to like go from behind the camera to like the other side, or you've thought about it for a long time and then that was just kind of like the
So
opportunity?
I never thought about it.
Okay.
So what happened was it was an accident, sort of. Okay, so I'll explain.
Okay.
So I so when I was 29, I
Hmm.
commissioned Mark Don, who was a photographer that used to shoot for Mystique magazine, great photographer, a friend of mine, to shoot some sexy, like implied pictures of me, right? Because I laugh now because I'm 46, but I was 29, right? I was about to turn 30, which
Hmm.
at the time felt ancient. I was like, oh, I'm almost 30. I'm going to be so old. So while I'm still
Yeah.
29, I'm going to get this last photo set while I'm still in my 20s, and I'll be able to remember myself by when I'm ancient and I'm 46, and I'll be like,
Uh-huh.
oh, I was so pretty once. So we took these pictures, and like as we were shooting, he asked me, he was like, do you want to do some, because they were all, like I said, they were all implied. So a lot of them were like half naked or mostly naked, but I'd be like covering my boobs, that kind of thing. And he asked me, he's like, do you want to do some
Hmm.
topless just to have? Now, I owned these photos, right? I've never allowed anybody to take
Hmm.
pictures of me, naked pictures of me that I didn't own. So he had no like skin in the game, no pun intended. But he was like, while we're here, do you want to just take some topless ones just so you have them? And, I don't know, maybe one day you'll wish that you'd taken them. And I was like, at that point, I was feeling like more comfortable. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I took my arms away and we took some topless pictures. Right. So when I got the photos edited, I had him edit some of the topless photos as well. And I was just
Hmm.
like, I'll save those for a rainy day. I'll give them to my husband when I get married, or I'll look at them when I'm 80, whatever. Right. Never plan to release them. So I released the implied shots on my website, hollyrandall.com, and I withheld the topless photos. Now, when I moved my website over from one like hosting server to another, I basically completely redid my website and completely moved it over. So I was republishing a bunch of photo sets. Um, I had foolishly kept the topless photos in with the implied photos, right? I kept them all in the same folder. And I asked my assistant to upload those photo sets, but I told her, I said, make sure that you delete the topless photos when you upload them. So basically, the way that it worked on my website was
Mm.
you upload the entire photo set, right? And then they
Yeah.
populate in the gallery. And I said, just delete
Okay.
the topless ones when they go into the gallery. And then when they publish, the topless ones won't be in there. And she
Okay.
was like, sure. And she did that, right? She did exactly what I told her to do. And they went to like publish on a Saturday morning. I wake up one Saturday morning, I go and I check my Twitter, and it's just like exploded. And it's like, Holly Randall finally shows us her titties. Like, finally, Holly Randall's naked. People have been like waiting for this forever because people have been asking me to show my tits forever. And I was like, now I'll never do that. Clutch my pearls. So I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, how did this happen? So I text my assistant. I'm like, you were supposed to remove the naked photo. She's like, I did. What do you mean? I did exactly what you told me to do. And I like go on my website and I look on the gallery, and sure enough, there's no topless pictures in there. And I'm like, what the fuck? How did this happen? Like
Oh.
someone hacked into my computer. So turns out what I had forgotten is that there's zip files that you can download if you don't want to just look at the gallery pictures. And I didn't
Okay.
think about how when you upload the folder, yes, it populates in the gallery, but it
Hmm.
also goes into the downloadable zip files. And I didn't think about that. So anybody who downloaded a zip file got everything that she had uploaded, which included the topless
Hmm.
pictures. So that's what happened.
Wow.
And it went like viral. I made it to like the front page of Reddit, where it's like oops,
No
I forget the title
way.
of the subreddit. It's like oops, didn't mean to, but it's like, it's one of those like wink wink, nudge nudge, like clearly I meant to. Nobody
Yeah.
believes me. that it was an accident. Everybody thinks it was like some genius marketing ploy. I swear to you, it was not.
I
It was
mean,
100% an accident. But I'm not dumb. Well, I'm kind of dumb, but I'm not that dumb. And I know better than anybody if something's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. And there's no backtracking. I
mm,
can't get those photos down. It is what it is. So I called my husband, my now husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, and he was at hockey. I remember he was at hockey and I called him like 5 times. And he like called me from the bench
mhm.
and he's like, "What's up, babe?" Like thinking, I don't know, my mom died. And I'm like, "Babe, there's naked pictures of me on the internet. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Rah, rah, rah. Do you hate me?" And he was like, "No, I don't care." And he was like, "You're beautiful. Your tits are great. It's fine." And I was like, "Oh, that's when I knew I was going to marry him."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay, so you don't care?" He's like, "I don't care." He's like, "It doesn't bother me." And I was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "All right, well then I'm going to double down on this. You know what? It's out there. I'm going to promote this and I'm going to make money off of this. What am I going to do? You know?" And so I did. And I
Yeah.
made more money on my website than I'd ever made. And then I still didn't like post nudes again for a while. And then I started posting like some nudes on my Snapchat because it was like 24 hours and then it would disappear,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. And then I went back to my OnlyFans. And then, yeah, I think when COVID hit, I was like, fuck it. And I started posting more nudes. And then you know how it is, slippery slope.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of went all in. And I was like, nah, now I have an OnlyFans. Oh, well, here I am.
I
Me
mean,
too.
so OnlyFans is not like the only switch you made from like behind to like the other side. You also do have a podcast. So
Yes, that was not an accident.
how that came around?
So
Talk about your
that
podcast though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that truly ended up being like the best decision I ever made. And that also came about was
Mm.
something that I had not planned. And that came about by like an existential crisis. And, I often think about this moment in my life when things are going like really, really bad, because
Mhm.
that idea was born out of one of like the darkest moments of my life.
Oh,
I was going through like a really dark period in my life. I'm coming up, it's actually crazy now. I'm coming up on 7 years of sobriety in July. And I had
wow.
had 7 years of sobriety earlier. I like have struggled with alcohol my whole life. And so I had had 7 years of sobriety. And then I relapsed, and it took me like 4.5 years to get like sobriety, get back on the sobriety train. So I was in this
Mhm.
like 4.5 year like period of time at the time. And so I was trying to get sober again. I had just been fired from Playboy. Twisties had pretty much completely dropped me. And
Wow.
so I had like no work. I was miserable, and I really felt like there was no place for me in the adult industry anymore. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like at the time, there was like nobody was really shooting like glam content anymore. Everybody was doing stuff really cheap, and I was just like, I don't know, there's no place for me anymore. So I was like, okay, what can I do instead? And I'm like, one of I think my honestly one of my like best characteristics is I'm really good at pivoting, right? Like I've always got a plan B. I've always got like something else I can do. I'm always thinking about like, okay, if this doesn't work, like where else can I go? I'm always, always a backup plan. And so I thought, I'm like, okay, like, right, maybe photography and directing like it isn't for me anymore. What else can I do? Like what are my other skills? What are my other capabilities? And I was like, well, there's this podcasting thing that, a lot of people seem to be doing now, and it seems to be pretty popular. And I thought, well, I like to talk, clearly. I have like the friendship and respect of a lot of my peers in the industry. I do feel that adult performers have been misrepresented in mainstream media. I do feel that my industry is like grossly misrepresented. And I've always felt that if people just knew, the people that I work with and just like heard our stories and really knew what the adult industry was like maybe they would see us differently. And at the time I was boxing at Box and Burn, which was a gym that I worked out at a lot. And they had a podcast and they had me come on the podcast. And that's where I met Ernie, who's my current sound engineer. And he was running the podcast. And I asked him, and I was like, hey, do you do like, I'm thinking about starting the podcast. Would you maybe help me? He was like, yeah, absolutely. I have a studio and all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, so I thought, okay, I'll do 10 episodes and we'll just see. And I really didn't think it would go anywhere. And I did 10 episodes and it went somewhere. And here I am.
It
Here I am almost
perfect.
400 episodes later and like over 7 years later. And yeah,
Wow,
still going strong.
400. Definitely going strong. That's amazing. Congrats to you on that too.
Thank you.
S-
But I mean, honestly, like, like I said, if I hadn't been fired by Playboy, if Choices hadn't dropped
Mhm.
me, if I hadn't been in this incredibly like horrible place in my life where I was like, I need to figure out something else to do with my life, like I wouldn't have taken that step. I wouldn't have tried it out. And it wouldn't have
Mhm.
like led me to where I am today. And I truly feel like it's not only like given me so many new opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise, it's like helped me grow as a person and it's made me a better person. And I've learned so much about other people. And it's just been like such an enriching experience. So I'm like super grateful for that. So, I would always say to anybody who's going through like a really hard time in their life, or if you've just been like fired from your job or anything like that, like you never know where these hard moments in your life will take you because sometimes whatever horrible thing just happened to you might have been the best thing. You just don't see it yet.
Holly, it seems like you're reading my mind. Every time you're saying something, you're like it's perfect for like where I'm trying to go next. But what would you say to someone who is trying to be the next Holly Randall? And then but they
Oof.
coming from they just wake up one day and they have this creative mind and they just want to be you. Or not you, but behind the camera and then do what you do.
Um, well, I would say definitely don't expect things to happen overnight.
Mm,
I worked really long and really hard to be where I'm at. I think
mhm,
that a lot of people expect instant gratification these days.
mhm.
I, I don't want to be like one of those like old people who are like, kids these days, they just expect, to just instantly be making so much money
Yeah.
back in my old day. But sometimes I do kind of feel that way. Like it's just like it takes hard work
Mhm.
and it takes a lot of effort. You need to sometimes just go through the trenches to learn the skills. Learning skills is everything. And I would say definitely take the harder path to learn the valuable skills over taking the easy cush job that's maybe going to pay you the money that you want, because I think especially as we move forward in society and we see like a lot of jobs becoming more automated, which I know is something that is frightening to a lot of people, it's important that you learn to develop skills that you can utilize, because skilled people will always be something that people will need. So whatever it is that you like, um, I would develop that skill. And it has to be something that you love, right? Because if it's not something that you love, then you're never going to enjoy what
True.
you're learning, and then it's always going to feel like a chore, and you're never really going to become very good at it because you're never going to love it, like you have to love learning, and you have to love what you're learning, and also like don't be afraid to take chances, and don't be afraid
True.
to leave the dull boring job, or the static place that you are in your life, because like life is so short,
It is
and
very
you don't
short.
want to look back and think like, my god, I just spent 20 years at a dead end job that I hated, and now here I am and I can't see like any way out. I mean, I just left, um what, like 2 years ago. I just dropped all of my very cush directing jobs for, Brazzers and Twisties, um, Playboy, like, brands that were so good to me, that paid me well, that I loved working for, where I was producing like great content. But, I don't know what it was. I just was feeling like I just didn't like want to go to set anymore. I don't know. And it was like I
Mhm.
couldn't understand why I felt that way. I was like, I should love this. Like, I love the people that I work with. I love the content I'm producing. These people are so good to me. Like, there's no reason that I should feel this way. But I just felt like I wanted something different, and I wasn't like learning anymore, and I wasn't growing anymore. So when this startup opportunity for X Suite, which is this new immersive creator platform that I'm working on, when that came up, and it was like, here's this opportunity to make like no money, and to be like super stressed out all the time, and to have to like go and like, you know, pitch, send pitch decks to investors, and like beg people for money, and like maybe get rejected all the time, and like constantly be scrambling. I took that opportunity because it's like really exciting, and I'm
Yeah.
learning so much about like the tech world, about AI, about things that I never thought that I would end up doing. I mean, I'm the CEO of a tech startup company, which is like crazy. I
Hey,
never
look at
thought that
you.
that would happen to me, but I took, and it was a huge, huge risk, and it's still a huge risk. Like, I mean, I really believe in this project, and I really believe that it's going to do well, and it's going to get off the ground, and it's going to be successful. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But like, I'm also not stupid. Like the whole thing could, who knows? Like
Yeah.
anything's possible, right? It may not work out, but I'll never regret taking this chance, because if I hadn't, like, I would always wonder what had happened, and the skills that I've learned and the things that I've learned are like, that is priceless. And I know that no matter what happens, like I'll figure it out. I will always figure it out. And like the next step, there'll always be a next step that will lead me in the right direction. So I think if you just follow your heart, and if you just do the next thing that excites you, and if you always feel like you're learning and you're growing and you're working with people that you love, like take that risk, take that chance, and beautiful things will happen to you.
Love that. Love that. Now, you are clearly like a businesswoman at this point. So you creative mind that led to like a whole business empire at this point, and you keep going and going, which is great. Um, how do you balance all of that with your life and then give time to work? Because it seems like it could be a lot.
Oh, terribly. Absolutely terribly. I'm not gonna lie. Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, I'm a mom too. I have a 4-year-old daughter.
Ooh,
Yeah, and a husband, and I also help take care of my mother. Who's 78. Gosh, she's gonna be 79 soon. Who requires
a
some looking
lot.
after. And yeah, it's hard. I mean, the mom guilt is like full force. Like my daughter is constantly like making me. She's not okay. she's not making me feel like I don't spend enough time with her, because of course she doesn't do that. But I think all women feel this way, right? Like, we all women who work, we feel like we don't give our kids enough time. But like, I do. I mean, she's in school Monday through Friday, like all kids are. And then, I pick her up after school, and we have dinner together, and I give her a bath, and I read her a story, and we spend weekends together. And I really like almost do no work travel because of her. I go to very few work events because of her. Um, but it's hard, I mean, I try to put my phone down during the weekends, but it's pretty difficult, especially like, when you're running a startup, especially in tech, when
Mhm.
everybody who you work with is a man, and they either have a wife who's a stay-at-home mom and takes care of the kids all the time, or they don't have kids. And so
Uh,
like they don't have to worry about,
get that.
what it's
Hmm.
like to have children at home, and
Yeah,
that work-life balance. So I don't know, man. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard, but I try to tell myself like I'm doing this for her. And here's another thing. Another big reason why I took a chance on this startup and I stopped directing is because, like, when I was directing, like, I'm just getting that paycheck, for that one day paycheck job. I don't have residuals. I don't own the content. I don't have like equity in the company, anything like that. It's the same with the models, when they're
hmm,
shooting for brands too. This, I have equity in the company. I have the opportunity to hopefully, grow a big company and make money and be able to, like, you know, sell my shares or retire and have money that I can use to support my family and like live off of. And that's why I took that chance, because I want to be able to, not have to work so much in the future and be able to provide for my family. So that's also why I did it. And so, I do try to tell myself like, okay, I just have to work hard now so that I can, have money to take care of my family later and not have to work so much. But I have to also remind myself that, you know, she's only going to be 4 once. She's only going to be 5 once. Like, I can't miss this part of her life so that like I
that's
can be
true.
around when she's 10, and then I wasn't around when she's younger, then it like doesn't matter as much. So, I think just like really just trying to be present when I'm with her, which is hard, I got a lot going on. So I just do my best. I wish I
It's
could,
great to hear.
like, that I struggle, because I'm being real. I wish I could give you some like really wise sage
No,
advice and
because
be like,
people can't
do this
relate.
and you shall strive, but like I'm struggling just like everybody else.
No, people think you may have some special ways, but we all in
Nope.
this together.
I am having a hard time just like you.
No, that's good. I mean, that's good. People will relate to that for sure.
Yeah,
Um, do you love traveling, Ollie? Your
I
dad is from South
do.
Africa, your mom from England. You a word citizen.
Yeah, I have British citizenship too, by the way, which I lately, ever since 2025,
Hmm.
January 2025, I clutch my British passport very tightly to my chest. You never know when I might need it. Um, yeah, I do love traveling, but I haven't really done it much since I had a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, traveling is hard with her, and I don't want to go anywhere without her. People talk about going on vacation without their kids, and I'm just like, I can't imagine going somewhere without her. Like, it wouldn't, if she's not with me, like, why? Like, I
Why?
don't want to go
I
anywhere
mean,
unless with my daughter.
it
So,
makes sense.
but
I
I do want to
understand.
take her. I do want to take her traveling. Like, we've talked about going to England. She's very much a mini me. She's a lot like me, so she loves the things that I love. I take her to the Renaissance Fair every year,
Um,
so she's really into that. So I promise I'll take her to England, So I'm very much like an Anglophile, and I'll take her to like the Tower of London, and I'll take her, to the old castles and stuff like that. So I really look forward to taking her, to the home to our homeland someday. But I do love
Oh,
traveling, and I I wish I could do more of it. I just now is not exactly the best time.
the best time? It makes sense.
Yeah,
If you could
so
go
much work.
anywhere in the world, where would you go? If you could just
Um,
wake up and go
God, somewhere new, I guess. Let's see. So
somewhere new, somewhere.
I've never been to Spain. I would love to go to Spain. I've
Okay.
never been there. Actually, I've never been to Greece. Okay, I take that back. Though I'd love to go to Greece. So I've been to
Okay.
Italy a couple of times. My father was a Greek and Roman scholar, and my we took a trip together to Italy a long time ago, just the two of us, which was like really special to me. And before he died, I always thought that I would take him to Greece with me, but that never happened. So uh, I would love to go to Greece, and that would be really cool. My daughter is actually also like, this is so crazy, but she's like loves Greek mythology. I started reading for Greek mythology because that's something that my dad used to read to me when I was little, and she loves it. She loves Greek mythology and she loves archaeology. I put on like National
Interesting.
Geographic, like the ancient Egyptians, and I completely thought that she would like get bored. She's 4, like she likes Paw Patrol, and she was riveted. She watched this National Geographic show
No
on
way.
archaeology for like 2 hours, just like glued
Oh
to the TV.
wow.
So
That's the sign.
I think that she would really love it too, and it would be really special for me to take her
That's really
and like
cool.
share my love of ancient like Greek and Roman history with her, which is something my father shared with me. So it would be like a really cool experience. So that's what I would love to do.
That's really cool. That's really really cool.
Yeah.
I hope I got all of these right. I think so. I
Yes.
believe so.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Um, it was a great conversation, to be honest. Like I said, it was really hard to like try to like prep for you, um, just because you've accomplished so much. But it's interesting though. It's really interesting, and I learned a lot. There's a lot of things that you mentioned that I wasn't new of, so it's pretty good conversation overall. Now, before I let you go, there's one thing that I do, which is pretty much like to kind of like dream going. I always ask my guests at the end of it, who do you feel or who do you know would be a good guest on here? And then you could either say now, you could think about it later and whatnot. And if you think
Hmm.
of someone, here's a caveat: if you think of someone, you could be the how do you call that? The mediator that connect us, and then keep just that dream going.
So I'm assuming probably what, somebody in the adult industry, right? Because that's like the people that
It could be in the adult industry.
I
It could
hmm.
whoever you feel would be. I've had someone from a Netflix industry kind of referring me to a fashion stylist. So I went from one industry to a kind of like correlated, but it was a whole different kind of conversation, which was great for
Mhm.
me. But I'm really open.
Well, I would say like, so Jared, who's the CEO of Cosmic Wire, uh, who is our parent company, he's obviously really
Hmm.
interesting. Like it's a Web3 company that's like doing a lot with technology, volumetric technology, which is what we're doing with X Suite. Um, so he would be good. I can connect you with our PR agent, and then I'm trying to think who else who's interesting. And one of my favorite interviews and one of my favorite people is Laura Desiree. She
Okay.
is a like I don't know what her official title is. She's like a sex educator and um, um let's see. She's a model, but she's not like an adult performer, but she's very involved in the adult industry. Um, like as like a sex work advocator, intimacy coordinator, pleasure educator, and activist. Yeah,
Wow. That
she's
could be a fun
awesome.
conversation.
I love her so much. Laura Desiree.
Wow.
She's like one of my favorite people.
Yes, sir.
She's such a fun interview.
All right. Well, Holly, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Uh,
And then yeah, just let me know when this airs, and obviously I'll promote it and all that fun stuff.